Good evening, and thanks to everyone for attending our Power Apps in an Hour BCS talk. My name is David Lloyd-Williams. I'm the Secretary of the BCS, and we have Dougie Wood from Valto, who's going to take us through what should be an interesting hour of understanding what Microsoft 365 can do and how we can use Power Apps to really extend that functionality. It is one of a series of webinars that we have. You're all welcome to join any of them. They're all advertised on the BCS website and by email, Facebook, LinkedIn, everything we can get hold of, really. So if you want to join, please join any in the future. We'll go over what's coming up. We've got a few interesting ones coming up. I'll go over what's coming up at the end. But until then, I'll hand over to Dougie with much more interesting things to say than I have. So over to you, Dougie.
Brilliant, thank you, David. Well, good evening, everybody. Today, I'm going to be giving you a demonstration on how you can create a Power App in an hour. So, quick introduction. My name is Dougie Wood. I'm one of the solution architects at Valto. Valto are a gold Microsoft partner. I specialize in document solutions. I've actually got quite a strong background in SharePoint. I've been doing SharePoint for about 10 years, and in the past couple of years, I've been focusing heavily on the Power Platform, which is Power Apps and Power Automate, to deliver digital transformation. So I actually lead the sort of Power Platform development team here at Valto. Today's session, I'm actually going to try and give you a real life scenario, essentially, where we're going to be looking at replacing an incident report, like a paper form, by digitally transforming that using Microsoft 365's Power Platform tools. So essentially what we're going to do is start off by talking about choosing a database for your Power App. So Power Apps, essentially, you can connect all sorts of different databases, but I'm going to talk to you about some key options about what you might want to choose for actually storing your data for your Power App. The example I'm actually going to go over today is actually using Microsoft Lists. So if you're already inside of Office 365, you might have seen that there is something called Lists, which is essentially a series of mini kind of databases that you can use and leverage those to create your Power Apps from. Then we're actually going to create our Power App. So we're going to create a Power App, which is a Canvas Power App. And that is actually going to be something that is going to be a mobile sort of friendly app that you can start submitting data through. Then we're going to take a little look at creating a Power Automate. So Power Automate is a way of creating automated workflows using Office 365. We're then going to look at sharing the app and sending that out, as well as reporting on that collected data and how we create views of the data directly inside of our list. At the very end, I've just got some of these slides, got some useful resources that might be of interest to you, and there will be time at the end for a general kind of Q&A if you've got any questions. The way that we're going to do it today is I'll give you roughly about an hour sort of presentation. Following that, we will be then doing a Q&A session and answering your questions. So some takeaways from today's session, you'll be able to choose the best database for your Power App. So when you're actually coming to design your Power App, the very first point that you want to be looking at is actually modeling your data. So it's very important where you're storing your data for your app. You'll know how to create an app in an hour. So the actual objective of this is we're going to create from scratch a Power App that you can submit data and store the data, report on it, as well as produce some automated actions as well. And we're going to understand the basics of Power Automate. So that's what we're going to use for our actual automation. So let's take a little look at the scenario. So the scenario that we're looking at is replacing an incident report. So this could be a paper form that somebody's filling out, maybe inside of a factory, for example. It might be a Word sort of template that they're filling out, but regardless, there's probably a level of kind of manual entering the information and then having to either scan it in or send us an email or something which is a long-winded job that we could definitely automate and make more efficient. So what we're going to look at doing is actually replacing this paper incident report, and we're going to be doing it with Power Apps. The part of the scenario is that we're going to want to access it via a mobile phone or a tablet. So actually the scenario I'm going to be using today will be using a mobile phone template. So Power Apps in itself is one of the products inside of Office 365. But PowerApps also has an app you can install directly on your phone or tablet, so you can access all the apps that you've created on mobile devices as well. The app needs to be easy to use for non-technical staff, so it needs to be nice and easy, simple, large buttons, things like that. And we want to be able to digitally store the data securely. So we're going to take a look at the next slide about some different places that we could possibly store our data, and then I'll show you how we sort of set that up. And use only products included in the existing Microsoft 365 licenses. So a lot of people who have already got licenses for Microsoft 365, like Business Basic and E1, are already paying for the products which we can use to build these Power Platform solutions. So you can start actually building them today if you've already got these licenses. We want to automate notifications when an incident is reported. So this might be, for example, when we get an incident reported, we want to send an email to maybe like the operations manager or something to let them know that there's been an incident reported. And there's other things we can do as well, maybe putting in some conditional logic. So maybe if, say, for example, here, if the police was notified, maybe you want to escalate that to somebody at a more senior kind of level. And we want to be able to view the reports, so get the data and actually view them in different ways. So being able to apply filters and extract that data as well. So choosing a database. So like I was saying before with PowerApps, really the first place you want to start when you're thinking about building your PowerApp is actually where are you going to be storing the data and what are the sort of fields and things like that that you're going to be storing. Now, PowerApps can connect to a wide range of different things to use as its database. It doesn't have to even be Microsoft products. It might be that actually your data lives in something like a third-party CRM system like Salesforce, for example. But in these scenarios, I'm going to be talking about what Microsoft are going to be offering you as potential places to store data. So the four kind of key options that you've got on the list here really is dependent on the size of the application, the amount of data that you want to store. So at the very bottom level is what you would have as like Excel. Now, we all know Excel's not really a database, but it is a place that you can store your data for your PowerApps. So if you're looking at something that maybe is for personal use, so it's only one or two people that are going to be using it in a very small team, an Excel spreadsheet that is stored inside of SharePoint or OneDrive can be a really good place that you can store that data. So if you're talking about hundreds of sort of rows of data or low thousands, then Excel might be okay. And again, is included in these sort of basic Office 365 licenses that you're already paying for. The next level is lists. Now, anybody who's got sort of a bit of experience with SharePoint will know that you can create SharePoint lists, which are essentially like document libraries without any documents. It's just rows of data that live inside of there. Now, this is actually what I'm going to be sort of demonstrating today. And Microsoft have actually presented us with a new product that's called Lists, which is this icon over here. But essentially, it is, if you're familiar with SharePoint, they are SharePoint lists with a much nicer, easier to use front end that's placed on top of it. Again, it's included in your licenses. Now, if most solutions that we would kind of work with for small, medium-sized businesses would be using lists as their database, because you can store hundreds of thousands of bits of data in there really easily, and of course it's included in the licenses you're already paying for. So it's quite a popular option, and as part of the scenario that I'm going to be showing you today, that's what we're going to be using as our database. A step up from that, so if you were talking, it's a really big kind of enterprise level application and you're going to be storing millions of rows of data, then you're going to really want to look at using something like maybe like SQL. But this, the sort of the pros and cons is obviously you can store a lot of data there. Maybe it's almost the chicken and egg scenario where actually your data already lives in SQL and you're wanting to use something like PowerApps to pull that data around to visualize it, or maybe it's a nice way of inputting data into SQL as well. But the con of that essentially is that it will require a premium PowerApp license, which can get quite costly. So there's pros and cons to those kind of options. Realistically, you wouldn't really start off with SQL. It's only really if you're already using SQL to store your data, then potentially you would be looking at that as your database. Then the final option on here is called Dataverse, which it's recently changed its name in November of last year. It was actually formerly known as Common Data Service, or CDS, but essentially it's the exact same thing. They've just rebranded it with a new name. they've got the same kind of back end as Dynamics 365. So if you've already got Dynamics 365 licenses, you will already have Dataverse in the background, which is essentially a set of entities, tables which are already pre-built for you, and you can add more tables and things like that into there. It's a little bit like, if you've not heard of Dataverse, it's a bit sort of like a SQL online essentially, and you can have relationships between your tables and things like that. Again, it's going to require premium PowerApp's license. So in the grand scheme of things, it's probably going to be cheaper and easier to set up than it would be a SQL server to start off with, but you will still require the premium PowerApp license. So again, it can be quite a costly way of doing things if it's only going to be a small kind of PowerApp you're going to have. If it's a large app that you're going to need, Dataverse is probably the best place to store your data, unless your data already lives inside of SQL, and in that case, obviously you would just be leveraging SQL already. So loading up on a mobile phone via the PowerApps app on their phone, which is then going to be filling out a form. Once that form is then submitted, it will then be stored inside of Microsoft Lists, which in this case is acting as our database. And then we're going to automate the notification to somebody that a new instance is being reported by using Power Automate. Then we're also going to look at the Microsoft List from a reporting perspective, where if we wanted to export the data, so how many incidents have been reported or types of incidents or things like that, we can look at how we can pull that out using views within inside of Microsoft Lists. So the first thing we're going to do is, I'm actually now going to transition out of this. It's not going to be death by PowerPoint. We're actually going to start looking at actually setting this up. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into Microsoft Lists. Now, Microsoft Lists is part of Office 365, and if you just to go to office.com and then go into the app launcher, you should see lists appearing inside of your apps. Once you're inside of here, this is the home page of Microsoft Lists, and we can see all the previous lists that I've created for different apps and so forth. I can create a new list by clicking on the new list button across the top, and then it's going to present me with some options and a sort of dialog box. So these options essentially, I will be creating one from blank, but I could be creating it from Excel. So if you've already got the kind of columns of your database set up in an Excel sheet, you can transfer those directly into your sort of SharePoint, your Microsoft List directly from Excel. You can also use it from an existing list. So say if you've already got a list set up, which you want to reuse columns or data from, you can reuse it from that as well. There are some templates. So if you want to start it off with something like travel request, what that will do is it'll set up some predefined kind of columns for you and essentially speed up the overall development process. I'm going to start off by creating a blank list. And in this case, I'm going to call this my incident reporting list. And this is where I'm going to store all of my data for all of the incident reports, which are going to be submitted via my PowerApp. I can give it a description, just say this is where I will store all of my data for incident reporting. And I can choose a color. At the moment, there's no way of actually specifying a unique color, but there are a range of colors that you could select. So you could say, okay, well, I'm going to select this particular one. And the same goes for icons as well. You can select an icon here, but you can't actually specify your own kind of icon. So I'm just going to select this clipboard because that will do me fine. And at the bottom, this is the bit which is something that's really worth considering, is where you're actually going to save your list. So as I was saying before, lists essentially are sort of a replacement for SharePoint lists. So when you click on the Save To option here, the default is My List, where it's essentially going to be saving it into your own kind of area, your own kind of OneDrive kind of area. Or you've got recent sites. Now these are the sites, SharePoint sites or Microsoft Teams that you have access to. So it really does depend really on who you are planning on sharing this data with, or who should be able to access the app, is where you want to create your list. So let's say, for example, I'm going to be sort of doing this for my sort of engineers team or something like that. Then I want to store this on my SharePoint sort of engineers site. In this case, I'm just going to leave it as my list just because it's a demonstration. But in reality, you want to be creating your list in an area that the people who are going to be accessing the data already have access to. So when I click on Create, that's going to spin up my list for me. Now, this is what my list looks like when I first come into it. Now, if I click on the New button, you'll see there is actually a basic data entry form, which the first field, essentially the default field, is always title. Now we need to now add in some rows of data, sorry, some columns essentially into here, which is going to act as our database for our PowerApp. So what I'm going to do actually is I'm just going to bring up the form, because we're going to model our data actually on the form itself. So we can see this is our sort of form, and we're going to say the employee details, who's reporting the incident. Now, the way it works by adding sort of columns into our sort of list in here is we click on this drop down and it will show us all the different types of columns that we could possibly add. Now, just like with any database, there's different sort of content types, there's different types of columns which are going to either show things as a single line of text, multiple lines of text, and so forth. And we want to map the correct type of column to the fields that we have on our form. So the different types of column, we've got single line of text, which is perfect for something like location, for example, or something that we're only going to put a small amount of information in. We've got multiple lines of text, which would be perfect for a much bigger sort of description box or a summary. And that could be something like instant details or instant calls or recommendations. We can also use things like location, which will be good for that sort of location box where we can actually enter some information into it. And it's going to pull out an address and all the other sort of other fields. It treats it like an object which has multiple items of data associated to it. We've got number, so this might be, say for example, if we were sort of, I don't know, saying how many sort of incidents happened or something like that. Got yes or no. Now this is perfect for something like the police notified field. It's either yes or no. However, you will have to specify a default value. So if you didn't want to do that, then you're best not using the yes no field. We've got person field, which is essentially like a lookup to your sort of profiles that you have inside of Office 365. So within Azure AD, where you've got all of your kind of employees, that's what this is essentially looking up. So it's just like a CC field in an email where you can select somebody from a drop down and then it brings that person in. But the really good thing about that is then that person is a object in themselves. So you only have to select that person's name, and then you've got things like all the details from Active Directory. So you've got their email address, their phone number, their department, their job title, and all of that information rolled up into one simple selection. That is a perfect thing to replace the need for actually typing out the name, the department, the phone number of that person. We can just simply select a person from a search field, and we'll automatically have all of that information. We've got date and time, so that can be really useful for like a date field of when was it reported, because this, although as a system field within inside of our list, we do actually have when the item was created. However, this incident report might not be created at the time of the incident. You might be creating this incident report the day after or 2 days afterwards. So you might want to backdate it. So using a specific date and time field is going to be really useful. We've got a choice. So this is good for like a drop down. So it might be, say for example, sort of where did it take place? Was it in the office? Was it in the car park? Was it in the warehouse? Something like that. And you can provide a list of choices. Hyperlinks, probably very rarely to be used, but you might want to put a sort of a link to something that is maybe part of the recommendation or something like that, and there's a link to a sort of a document or something. A currency, it might be, say for example, this has nothing to do with incidents, but maybe this PowerApp is related to sort of like proposals or an expense request or something like that, and you want to submit an actual currency. So afterwards, when you come to export your data into Excel, the data is in the correct format, so you could do calculations on it. And do sort of totals and summaries. Images, if you want to add any images as you're kind of going along, and there are some more options, but to be honest, most of the things you'll ever need to do are actually in this option here, so I'm not going to go into the full details of the more options. So now what I need to do is start mapping out what fields I actually want inside of my app. So inside of my database, I'm going to map against what is inside of this form. So the first thing, employee details, actually, I don't need to create a column for each one of these. I'm just going to create a person field, and I'm going to call this employee. So you can select an employee from a sort of drop down, and that would automatically give me the name, department, phone number, because we're pulling that information directly from our Azure AD. The next is the description. So we're going to add a location. So add the location field. I'm going to add a date and time. So I'm just going to call this date, and I want to include the time. And we've also got the ability to have friendly format, which just puts it in a nice kind of way, so it would just say submitted today or something like that. But I'm going to leave that off for now because it's nice to see it as a full kind of date. We can also add things like default values as well to this, so it could automatically default to today's date, but then we could override if we wanted to. So it can take that additional manual step out of creating this form. And we can also do things like in one of the more options, we can choose to whether it requires information or not. So you cannot submit the form without that particular field. And then I'm going to add a police notified. So this is going to be my yes, no field. So I'm going to sort of say yes, no. And I'm just going to say police notified. That's the name of my column. And it's going to default to yes. So I'm going to change that to no, because I would have thought more often than not, the police aren't going to be notified about this particular incident. Then I want to cover an incident detail. So incident details is going to be a lot more text. So in here, I'm going to provide this as a multiple lines of text because I'm expecting a lot more text from the person filling out this incident report. I want incident causes as well. So again, multiple lines of text because we're expecting quite a bit of text to be submitted. Same with follow-up recommendations. It's going to be multiple line of text again. And then the very bottom here, we've got reported by, and I'm not going to add anything on that because, as I said before, the system by default actually has the ability to track who created the item. So we don't need them to actually populate that. The system itself has some default fields. It actually has a field called created, so it knows the exact date and time the item was created. It has created by, so it knows the exact person and the Office 365 profile of the person who created it. It has a modified by, so when it was last, so who it was last modified by, and a modified date and time as well. So if it was ever updated, that's all traceable as well. So now we've actually got our fields mapped out into our list in here. It's probably good to actually start adding some data in here just to make sure we've got everything right. It also really helps when it comes to creating your PowerApp to have some data already inside of your list, so you can tell what's what and if things are sort of formatted correctly. So I'm going to click on the new item button, and this is my sort of quick input form. So I'm going to just say this is Mr. The employee reporting it is myself. Location, I'm going to say warehouse. The date and time is reported. We'll say it's today at 10 a.m. The police was notified. Yes, they were. Incident details. I tripped down the stairs. Incident causes, boxes at the top of the stairs. Follow recommendations, move those boxes. So I'm going to click on save and make sure all of that is then submitted. So I've got all of that information now stored inside of my list. Now, to make it as easy as possible for when I create my PowerApp to make sure that I've got plenty of data in there, I'm going to sort of duplicate these items a little bit just to make sure I've got plenty of items. And I would suggest before you make your PowerApp, you probably want at least 5 items in your list because it's going to make it a lot easier in the later stage when we come to create our PowerApp. So to do this, I'm going to click on the Edit Grid View button across the top. And essentially that will put it into like a spreadsheet mode where I can actually then drag this down, and it's going to create me a few items as I move this through. And I'm just going to change a couple of these fields in here. Like so. Well, maybe it didn't select George there. And then we can select a couple of different dates. Just make sure we've got some different things in here. Basically, I'm just looking for a range of different data just so I can tell the difference inside of my app. We'll select the rest of these to be no. Sort of information. There we go. So we've got a little bit of different data in here now, so we can tell the difference when we come through to our app that we've actually got some unique information. So let's just change a couple of other little bits in here. So we'll say this is office, car park, office again, and this can be car park. So you've just got some different items, some different data. Now we can exit that grid view, and that's going to save all of my data. So now we've now got all of our data stored inside of our list. I can now create my Power App directly from this data. So the really cool thing about this is that it's going to spin up my Power App directly from this data. And that's why it's really important to have the fields and some data in there, because it is now going to make a bit more sense when it actually spins up my Power App. So now across the top, we can see we've got this Power Apps button. Now, when I click on that, it's giving me the option to create a new app. Now, when I choose to create an app, what this is going to do is it's going to spin up a Power App using this data and using a default mobile phone kind of template. So I'm going to call this my incident report app, and then click on create. Now, what this is going to do, and it should do it fairly quickly, to be fair, but courtesy of the live demonstration, sometimes they can go a little bit slow. So I'm going to try and talk over it whilst it's going through. But essentially what this is doing is it's taking out all the data that I've created and it's spinning up an app and trying to place things in the right kind of order so the app kind of makes sense. It's going to create some default kind of pages within inside my app, and it's going to try and place the right data in the right kind of way. It is a little bit hit and miss occasionally, and we are going to have to tidy it up to make use of it, but this is all part of the kind of demonstration. It usually is about 80% right. Sometimes it can be a little bit off, but it will give it a good kind of example of how we can kind of tidy up our form as we kind of come through to it. But essentially, it's going to create 3 sort of screens inside of my app, and I'll talk to you a little bit about screens, but it'll create a home screen, it'll create a new item screen, and it will create an edit screen as well. So we can kind of go through each of those as it's now created. So there we go. It's now created me my Power App essentially. And as I was saying before, it's created me these default screens. So the default screen that it's opened up for me is the browse screen, which is the home page. And actually, as it happens within Power Apps, the home page is always the page which is at the top of this stack on the left-hand side. And you can move them around by clicking on the 3 dots here and move up or move down. But the home page, the app opening, will always be the one that's at the very top. We've got the browse screen, which is the home page. Now, what this is essentially made up of is what we refer to as a gallery, which is already connected up and it's pulling through the data directly from our list. It's got a search box, so it's going to filter down these different items. We've got a title across the top, which is just known as a label, essentially. It's just a piece of text. And then we've also got the ability to create new items here, which essentially will just transition us into the edit screen, which is like this, which is automatically built as a form, which we're going to tidy up in a moment. And then it's also created a detail screen, which is what's loaded whenever you select an item within here. So if I just show you now, if I click on the play button across the top, this is what our app looks like. And if I click into it, I can see my items. I can click on the pencil button and I can edit that item. If I click on the cross, it's going to bring me out and bring me back to the home page. But there's a few things we might want to do to tidy up this app so it's not just as it is at the moment. The first thing I want to probably do is just tidy up the information which is showing here. So it's pretty good actually that it's already found the kind of the employee detail and the location. That's probably what I would have selected actually anyway to show on here, which is pretty good. But I might want to add, might want to change this around a little bit actually. So the bit across the top, I'll have as the employee, and then I want to have the sort of date and time that it was created maybe here. So the first thing I'm going to do is select this particular area. And what I should mention is anything that you do inside of this top area here is automatically reflected in all of the sort of tile area of the gallery beneath it. So at the moment, you can see what this gallery is made up of is a separator, which is just a sort of line, an arrow, which is on the right-hand side, the body, which is just this bit of text here, a subtitle, and a main title. We can add more things to it using the insert tab. We can add more kind of components to the page as well if we wanted to. And anything that we do, so say for example, if I move this, you'll see it reflects it automatically with all the areas beneath it. So the first thing I'm going to do across the top is I want to change this to actually this area be the person's name. So across the top, we can see it's already got this item.title. Now, when it's saying this item, it's talking about the item inside this gallery that's loading up. And if I just remove title, put full stop, you'll see all of the kind of bits of information, the data it's got based on this item. So we can see all the different things which it's pulling through based on the data that we have inside of here. So if I'm interested in the employee name, for example, I could just start typing employee, select employee, and now because that this is an object, it's going to say, well, what do I now want to display? So if I click on the dot again, it's going to show me all the different things that it's got. Like I was saying before, this is pulling through all the information from Azure AD. So I've got the department of the person, for example. So I can automatically pull through what the department of each of these people are. I could pull through their email address if I wanted to, and sort of pull through the email. But in this case, I want their display name. I want the person's actual name. So I'm going to pull through the display name. Now, everything that PowerApps is doing is actually using formula, which is very much like Excel. So it's very easy to sort of put together sort of strings of information. So let's say, for example, I wanted to put the title of the person in front of them. So what I can do for this is if I used the and symbol, I want to say this item dot title, and that's going to bring that through. Now, I will need to just put in a little spacer between that. And now I've got the title and the person's display name. So it's this item dot title, as well as it's sort of adding together with the person's display name. So you can see it's very much like Excel-based formula. So it's not heavy programming. It's all low code to achieve this. The next field beneath it, I'm going to change to created. Oops, should have removed that first. Created. And then I've got the date and time that that was actually submitted. I can make some branding changes. So if I wanted to change some colors, just like with anything as Microsoft, you've got the ability to sort of change colors, fonts, bold, italic, all that sort of good stuff. There is also a little theme engine over here. Now, with the theming of your Power App, essentially, there's no way to add your own custom theme. You have to build that up yourself. But if you can find something which is close or generic enough, I usually start off with something like this light theme, which is just going to turn things sort of gray for a start. But you can build and you can add your own colors into your app as well. So as a very quick tip of something that I would often do is I would also create a little styling screen that I can reference my own colors. So it's a bit like a CSS style sheet. So if your colors ever change, then you can change them in one place and then it would automatically reflect elsewhere. So if I just go into my new screen, create a blank screen in here, I'm going to call this my style screen. And I'm going to insert, this can actually be anything. You could reference the color of absolutely anything, but I'm actually going to insert an icon. Again, it could be any icon, but it's easier if it's a square, to be honest, because it's a bit more visual to see it all as one color. So I'm going to insert a rectangle in here. And now this is what I'm going to reference for my color everywhere else, essentially in my app. So the color that is set to this particular square is what the color is that I'm going to use everywhere. So I'm going to use a really horrible red color to start with, just to make it as obvious as possible. Now, the way to reference it is actually the object's name. So I'm going to change this and call this primary, because this is going to be my primary color. I'm also, just for my own sake, I'm going to create a little label, and I'm going to call this primary color, so I know which one of my boxes is a primary color. I'm going to duplicate this as well. So I'm going to create a secondary color and change it over here. So this is going to be my secondary item. I'll just change the text. The text on the top is purely for my sake only. The system doesn't actually need the text sitting on top of it at all. It's just so I know which one is my secondary color and which one's my primary color. So in this case, I'm going to change that red to actually being, say, for example, a yellow or something like that. And I'll use these as sort of very bright colors first, and I'll come back and change them afterwards. Now, the way I can use this is actually then selecting something like, for example, the sort of the text here, and then going into the properties area and finding the color property of the text. So let's just select color, and then at the moment it's just set to this sort of gray color. And you can see what sort of black, sort of gray it is here. But if I then change this, so I automatically remove what formula is in there, and then change this to primary, which is referencing my style screen component, you can see it's automatically now set it to red. So this is using my primary red color. If I changed it to secondary, it would use my secondary color. So it's a great way of just quickly changing that. Now, I'm also going to change this top bar across the top as well. So in this case, it's not the color, it's the fill of the top bar that I want to change, the background fill. So this is going to be my primary color. Okay. Now, when I go back into my style screen and change this, so let's say we're going to change this to a much nicer color, a nice blue color, and we're going to have a secondary color, which is say like a nice sort of gray. And then we go back to our screen. We've now seen it's now styled it up a little bit nicer. So we've now got our primary color in the background and a secondary color using as our title fonts on here. Also, I'm going to update this text here just because it's a little bit long. So I'm just going to call this my incident app, just a little bit sort of neater and tidier. So that's the home page sorted. We would have to do the same changes for the colors actually on all of the pages as well. So we'd have to select the sort of backgrounds of each. So I'm not going to bore you with doing that as you kind of go through it all, but you would need to in the real world go through that and change the backgrounds and the sort of fonts and things on each page. But once you've changed it once, you can just change the colors using this style screen. So the next thing I'm going to do is actually go into my edit screen. I'm going to update my my form in here. So as you can see, there's a few things which are not quite right about my form. So things like the instant details box is a bit small, and I might even be missing a couple of fields. So sometimes it can miss out on a couple of fields that you've put in place as well. So what I'm going to do is open up my edit screen and select the form item on over here. And then I can click on edit fields, so I can see the fields are in place. So I just want to double check that all my fields are here. So I've got title, employee location, date, police notified. Oops, let's move that over there. Police notified, instant details, instant causes, fault recognition. Brilliant. We've got everything in one form. So the other bits that I want to do to tidy this up a little bit now is actually I want to make my instant details box a little bit bigger. I'm expecting a lot more text. By default, though, PowerApps will convert every sort of text box into a single line of text. So you have to then convert it back. So I'm going to select this box here, and you can actually just drag it. You can drag it down. A lot of the elements inside of PowerApps are kind of drag and drop, and you can manipulate them directly through the user interface. So I'm going to drag this down a little bit to give it a little bit more room. And then what I need to remember is also on the mode section on the right hand side, change that from single line of text to multiple lines of text. And now it acts as pushing the text to the top. I can also control the size and the height with the properties on the right hand side as well. So maybe I want to make this a 250 sort of height. And then I'm going to do the same for my other boxes as well. So I'm going to select this box here, change the mode to multi-line, as well as the height to 250 to keep consistency. And I'm going to change the sort of the mode of this as well to multi-line and height to 250. Okay. So now our form is now sort of complete, and this is our new form, and it's also going to act as our edit form as well. So all that page is now complete. You would also need to remember to go back in and change your detail screen. I don't have the time today to go through and change all of that, but you would probably want to update that and change that as well. So now we've got our kind of Power App. It's all set up, ready to go. I can actually test it. So if I go back to the home page now and click on the play button, I can see the items. And I can create a new item by clicking this button up here, give it a title, say Mr., and then employee details. This is where I'm going to enter someone's name, so I can type in someone's name. Select from the drop down the person, the location, so it's been the warehouse, the date and time. So I'm going to say it's happened yesterday and it happened at 12 o'clock. The police was notified, no they weren't. Instant details, they ran over their foot with a forklift. Instant causes, not looking where driver was going. Follow-up recommendations, look where you are going. So now when we click on the save button across the top, that's then going to submit our item, and it's actually automatically loaded it now into our system. But if I just jump back into my database view, so I'll go back into my list, we should now see our new item that has been added. So if I just refresh the page, and that should be, there we go. So that's the item that's now been added at the bottom. So we now know this is now working. We have now got a functioning Power App, which is submitting data directly into our Microsoft list. So I'm going to jump back into my Power App now. And to finalize it, I now need to publish this so that people can actually access it. So I'm going to click on File, Save, and Publish. So we're now publishing our Power App. And now once we've published it, we actually need to share it. So at the moment, I've just published it and only I have access to it because I'm the person who's created it. So I need to click on Share. And now this is going to share my Power App out to other people. So it's going to bring me to my sharing screen for my Power App. Now, there's two different things we can do. We can share it with somebody as an editor. So I might want to share this with, say, Chris as an editor. So I would just need to select the co-owner button across the top and then click on Share. And that's automatically going to share that app with him as a co-owner. So as a co-owner, he would also see the Power App appear inside of his apps area that he could edit it and update it and maintain the app as well. I can also share it with people sort of individually so they can just open the app, or I can even share it with security groups as well. Which is going to be interesting if it's going to pick up. Curse the live demonstration. So you can also share it with Active Directory security groups as well. So you can automatically roll this out to sort of groups of people so they can access it. Once it's shared with people, they will then see it appear inside of Power Apps. If I just go back to my app launcher and then go into Power Apps, see it appear inside of here, inside the browser. So as it launches up, they'll see their app appear inside of here. They'll also see it if they install the Power Apps app on their phone. Once they've sort of logged in with their Office 365 credentials, they'll then see the app appear there as well. And when we click on it, it's then this is what it will look like, that we can open it up inside the browser. We can access it up on our phone. You can even embed these Power Apps directly inside of Microsoft Teams. So if you're already using Microsoft Teams, you might want to have a tab inside of your team, which automatically opens up an app like this. So if you're sort of midway through conversation, you want to report something, you've got an app which can do that directly for you as well. So that is our app, all nicely set up and submitting data now. And we've got our data directly inside of our list. Now, the next thing that I wanted to do to look at is actually provide a way of automating a notification to somebody that this incident has actually been reported. Now, what I'm going to use for that is Power Automate. And now this is another Microsoft 365 product, which is all about designing sort of workflows and automations. If anyone's used SharePoint Designer before for workflows, is a direct replacement for SharePoint Designer. So I can actually create an automation directly from here as well. So by clicking the Automate button across the top, and then under Power Automate, I'm going to go and create flow. I should also mention as well, you'll probably see the term flow sort of dotted around when you're using Power Automate. The name Power Automate has again, it was previously called Flow. Microsoft have changed the name to Power Automate. So there's a few places you might still see it called a flow. There are a bunch of different templates for Power Automate as well. I should explain with Power Automate, you don't have to, it doesn't just automate data and things that you have processes inside of Microsoft 365. You can also connect to all ranges of different third-party connectors as well. So it might be, say, for example, the sort of data that lives in a totally different system like Salesforce or a CRM system, HubSpot, something like that, and you'll want to automate something and either bring that data into Microsoft 365 or push it out to an external place as well. So there's all sorts of different templates that you can pick from. And there's a few ones around sort of getting approval and posting directly into Teams automatically for you. But I'm going to use this default send a customized email when a new SharePoint list item is added. And as I said before, Microsoft List is just SharePoint lists. So all the items which are actions which are using SharePoint lists inside of Power Automate is also referring to Microsoft Lists. So I'm going to use this as my template. What that's going to do is it's going to spin up a kind of a templated workflow for me using the connections of this database. Now, if any of these were read, oops, what just happened there? I think it's just refreshing the page. If any of these were red, all I need to do is click on these 3 dots here and then just click on create or add a new connection, and that will then add it into it. But it's essentially asking, does it have permission to operate and use my Office 365 data? Can it use Outlook and send emails on my behalf? Can I access SharePoint on my behalf? And that's essentially what this is doing. So it's saying, yeah, okay, I'm happy to do that. Now, when I click on the Create Flow button, again, what that's doing is it's spinning up a template. It's creating a new workflow for me using a template. The next thing it's going to do is show me the home page of this particular Power Automate workflow. And I can see certain details about when it was created, who created it, who the owner of it is, the different connections, the data that it's going to be interacting with, as well as the sort of the title. Beneath that is, we can see a 28-day run history. So this is a great place for actually troubleshooting any issues that your Power Automate workflow may be running into. It'll show any failures, and you can go in and
Right, seems that Dougie's having a few internet problems. Let's wait just a couple of minutes and hopefully he'll come back. He's obviously doing
can you
something.
hear me okay now?
Yeah, we can hear you, Dougie.
Okay,
Sorry,
cool. How long has it been cut off?
We can't see you, but we can hear you. So are you okay to carry on?
Yeah, can you see my screen still okay?
We can see a screen, just not see you. Maybe it has been breaking up a little bit, so maybe you just carry on as you are.
Okay, I'll tell you what I'll try and do. I'll turn off my webcam and just see if that helps speed things up a little bit.
Okay.
Okay, cool. So I'm not too sure where we broke off from there. So I'm just going to do a little sort of 30-second recapper. But essentially, from my database, I've clicked on Power Automate. I've clicked on Power Automate here, created a flow, and I've selected a pre-built template, which is send a customized email. Now, from here, I've got to the home page of my Power Automate, and I want to edit this Power Automate. So to do that, I'm going to click on the Edit button, and it's then going to show me my workflow. Now, the very first thing I want to do is actually change the name of my workflow, because it's just given it a very sort of generic sounding name. So I can just double click into there, and I'll call this my incident report auto email. So I'm going to automatically email someone whenever an incident report is created. Now, the way Power Automate actually works is just like with anything in life, it has a start and a middle and an end. It has to have a trigger, which is what is starting the Power Automate workflow, and that can be all sorts of things. That could be, in this case, it's when an item is created inside of this particular SharePoint list or Microsoft list. But that could be anything. That could be when you receive an email. That could be on a scheduler. So you could say actually run it every sort of hour or every 10 minutes or something like that. It could be even based on third-party systems. So it might be, say, for example, in Salesforce, whenever a new account is added, you want to automatically trigger a Power Automate workflow. And then what your Power Automate is then built up of is multiple actions. So actions are actually going off and doing things. So in this case, it's getting my profile information and then sending an email. So it's going to send who it's going to send to, the subject, and this is the body of the email. But there are all sorts of different actions we can add directly into our Power Automate. So if I click on Add Action in here, you can see all the different things we could possibly connect to. If I just click on this drop down here, you can see it works with SharePoint, it works with OneDrive, it works with a whole host of other third-party applications. So there's all sorts of things in here that it can connect to that you might already be using. So if you're using things like Jira for task management, Salesforce for CRMs, HubSpot for CRMs, Google Drive for your documents. There's all sorts of things that it will natively integrate directly with. MailChimp for sending out sort of surveys and sort of campaigns and things like that. and it integrates directly with all of that. And if you can't find something that it directly integrates with, you can also use HTTP requests as well to natively integrate with any APIs that you have. The other thing that you can do as well with inside your Power Automate is create conditions. So if I click on add an action, you'll see one of the controls here is actually a condition. So this is where you can have almost like an if this then that type of approach, where you can say if this value is equal to this, then essentially do this if the value is true. So I'm not going to have enough time to demonstrate this to you today, but a good example of that might be, for example, where we got police notified. We could pull that through as a field to say police notified is equal to yes or something like that. And if it is, then maybe we want to escalate this and we want to send a very specific email to the sort of operations director or something like that to say, by the way, there's been this major incident and the police have been notified, please follow up on it, blah, blah, blah. And if no, maybe it's just an email to the sort of generic operations manager to say this incident, please follow up on it with any recommendations and so forth. But the idea being is your Power Automate will start off with a trigger, work its way down and be able to then sort of create certain conditions and actions. In this case, we're going to be sending an email. Just to sort of hard code this, I'm going to put in my own email, just as an example of this, and then click on save. Now this is saving my Power Automate. It's activated it, now it's ready to go. So I'm just going to go back to my homepage here, and I'm going to go back to my PowerApp to submit a new item to get it to trigger. So I'm going to say this is Mr. Valentine, location, warehouse, date, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to fill out all the fields, but then I click on save, and that's going to create my new item. So that's my new item now created, and that should now very quickly start spinning up to actually trigger my workflow. So while that's happening in the background, I'm also just going to jump back into my list inside of here and just talk to you a little bit about the what we can do inside of our database. So inside of our list, we can apply filters where we want to filter down certain types of information, and we can use multiple filters inside of our database. So let's say, for example, I'm only interested in incidents which have happened inside the warehouse. So I can click on this drop down here, click on columns, click on filter by, and then click on warehouse, and that's then going to filter down this particular set of information. Again, I might want to then filter that further to say, actually, I'm only interested in warehouse where the police have been notified, for example. And now we've just seen my email has just come through. So this is what it would then come through and look like. Very basic email. We can always update this, but that's the notification email, which is now being sort of triggered to come through. And we can configure that to look exactly how we want. Back in our list. So we can also export our data directly inside of Excel as well. So by clicking on export to Excel, that's then going to export our data directly into Excel spreadsheet. And this is what we can then use for doing analysis. We can create charts on this and all sorts of cool sort of interactive things. The data as well can automatically refresh. So it's now got that live link directly to our SharePoint. So if I was to add any more items and then click on refresh, that's automatically going to keep pulling down that information. So if I was to create a chart, it would automatically be updated every time I click on this refresh button as well. It's also worth mentioning when you filter your data, it's automatically going to the export as well. So if I was to filter this by, say, warehouse again, and then I click on to export Excel, it's only going to export out these 3 items. So again, it's a nicer way of sort of bringing that down. Now, by default, inside of your list, you'll notice there's a view across the top. This is our view selector. That's called all items. And it's going to show us all items regardless of any filters. But we can create our own almost like reports out of this by filtering these down and saving those views. So let's say, for example, I'm only interested in where the police have been notified. I could filter this down and say, yes, I only want to see ones where the police have been notified. And then I'm going to save this view and call it my police view. And you can see here, I can choose to make this a public view or not. If it's unticked, only I will see this view. Whereas if I leave it ticked, everybody who has access to this data will be able to see that view. So I can say, yep, save. And now I can sort of see the difference between my all items, which is all items regardless of any filters, and my police view, where all it'll show me all the rows of data where the police notified is equal to yes. There's other things we can do as well. So we might want to group by certain fields. So maybe group by employee. So we can see all the different incidents that have been reported by the employee. So I can, and it will give a little total. So I can say, actually, I've got 3 here. So I reported the most incidents. And again, I could save that view. So I can come back to it. So I can say by employee. So I can now choose between my all items view, my by employee view, by police view. And it's all the same data, but it's actually then filtering it down in those different ways. And maybe there's one last kind of view. Maybe we want to do by location. So we're going to say, group by location. And we can see all the incidents which have happened inside the car park, all the ones in the office, warehouse, and so forth. Again, I'm going to save that as a view. So I can nicely now transition between my all items, so I can see all my items, by employee, so I can see the sort of employee information, the by location, so sort of all my data by location, and the police view, where I'm seeing all the ones by the different views. We can also update our views, so we can have different columns inside of our views. So let's say for a police view, I'm actually only interested in the employee and the location. I don't need the rest of the fields in here. I can click on this drop down and click on edit current view. And this is going to show me all the columns that I have access to inside of this view. So let's say, for example, I'm not interested in the incident details. I'm only interested in the employee and the location that's taken place, for example. I can also reorder this as well. So let's say, for example, I'm not interested in title. I'm interested in the location. So I'm going to move that first, and I can reorder what columns I'm going to see. I can then click on OK. And now that has then changed my view, so I only see those 3 columns inside of my view. But all of my other views still have all the other columns inside of here. There's other things we can do as well, so we can format things. So for example, let's say for police notified, maybe we want anything that is yes to turn red, for example. So on this drop down, we can click on column settings and then format this column. And then we've got some pre-built answers. So because it knows it's a yes, no field, it's automatically got the options to format yes or no. So I'm going to select yes or no. And actually it's got it the wrong way around there. It's put it as red and as yes. Sorry, it's got green as yes and red as no. So I want it the other way around, because actually if the police are notified, I think that's more important. That should go red. So I'm going to change actually no to have no fill. I don't want it to have anything. And I want to change yes to be a very dark red, so it stands out to me. So click on save. And now I've got this formatted. And we can do that with all of these other different options as well. We can do it with location. And you can see we can add some conditional formatting. So we can add different rules, different values, depending on the different locations. It could have different colors, different styles, things like that, to really make it pop out and stand out as we're kind of going through. So just conscious of time, I'm just going to jump back to my slides. So we've talked about Microsoft Lists. So that's where we've stored all of our data. We've talked about PowerApps, which is a Canvas Power App, which is basically now submitting our data into our Microsoft List. And we've looked at Power Automate, which has created an automated workflow, which is sending out an email to people based on that incident report being sent out. So some useful resources that might be worthwhile you taking a look at before we start talking about Q&As. Some useful resources here. I've created a little article called the top 10 Power App examples. So if you're thinking about transitioning and going and using Power Platform and Power Apps yourself, there's some really good examples I put together here of what I've been using Power Platform for over the past couple of years to create some different and some unique Power Apps. Power Apps templates. So I suggest you take a little look at some of the Power App templates. There's some really cool pre-built templates that you can use that Microsoft have published, and you can have a little look at those. Same with Power Automate. There's some really good sort of templates that you can use for free. Actually, I'll just quickly jump back into that just because it is worth kind of showing these templates. And it does interact with all sorts of different things as well. Like I was saying, you can automatically get it to jump in. And these templates, a lot of them as well, real people have created these, and then there's an option to submit your Power Automate workflow to Microsoft for them to review and then publish to this templates library. So there's all sorts of different things in here, hundreds if not thousands of different things, and they integrate with all sorts of third-party products. So let's say, for example, I was interested in Power Automates related to Twitter. I can search for Twitter and then find all the different templates which have been created for this. So maybe you want to retweet with an approval or pull all of the tweets into an Excel spreadsheet or something like that. It really is worth looking at some of these different templates because it's a great place to start learning from. We've also got sort of getting started with Power Automate. So the link here, which has got some great sort of courses and things to sort of learn from, as well as our Valto YouTube channel. So we frequently post new content to our YouTube channel, which has got some short snippets of information and some how-to guides for using Power Automate, Power Apps, things like that. So it's worth checking out that as well. If you need any help, we do offer sort of remote workshops on all the topics that have been discussed today. We also offer various other workshops related to Teams, Microsoft 365, SharePoint, SharePoint migrations and Power Apps. And if you would like to sort of contact me, my email is dougie@valto.co.uk, and I'm more than happy to answer any of your questions now. And if you would like to send me emails afterwards, please feel free to do so. So maybe hand back to sort of David if there's some questions there.
Hi, Dougie. Yeah, that was really good. Thank you very much. Very, very brave to do live demonstrations, especially over the web. I know we had a few hiccups, so thank you everybody for bearing with us on that one. Yeah, battled through, got everything done. Interesting. Brilliant. That you connect everything from Excel all the way through to Salesforce. Really, you know, the whole Power Automate thing, and really interesting there. I'm not too sure about the word Dataverse though.
They've changed the name multiple times actually. I think originally when it started, they called it like it had a really strange name, like Project Canada or something like that. It had a really odd name. Then it went to Dataflex, and then it's Dataverse, and they bounced around a few different names. But yeah, I think their marketing branch has got some funny ideas.
I think they have. We do have a few questions. So I'll rattle through these. So a few people saying thank you very much, and can we make the slides available, especially the links that you had?
So sorry, I broke up then a little bit on my end. What was that?
Sorry, yeah, a lot of people saying really useful talk.
Brilliant.
And they'd like a copy of the slides that you have. So I don't know if it's possible to get hold of the slides.
Yeah, definitely. If you want to drop me an email at dougie@valto.co.uk, I'd be happy to send the slides over to you and some supporting materials and things like that that you might find useful for getting started.
Okay, that would be brilliant. Thank you. Question here, we've had the date format really. Is it easy to change it to UK styles? Is it based on the PC settings?
So it's one of those. The two areas actually that you need to make sure that you change. In the example that I'm using lists there, you need to make sure that your SharePoint environment had the correct regional settings set up. And then also in Power Apps, it will default to the US date format, but some very basic kind of text formula kind of to convert it to whatever format you would like it to appear in.
Okay, because I think the final formats, you had the UK date formats in there.
Yeah.
So I guess that's handled by that. Okay. So would a list be a good data repository if you wanted people to capture photos with the app?
Yeah, you can store images. So there is a type of column inside of your list, which is called image, and you can store images with that. There are controls inside of Power Apps which you can take photos as well. So there's actually a really good case study that we published recently for City of London, where we built a Power App for their gardeners essentially. So all the gardens that get looked after in London. They had these maintenance guys going out, and say, for example, there was a broken gate that they needed to repair. They had a PowerApp they had on their phone that they could take a photo of the broken gate, put some details about that, save it, and that will go back to the head office then and raise an action essentially for somebody to order a new gate. And there was also a second half of that PowerApp, which was then the tasks for the sort of maintenance guys going out to say, okay, well, today you're going out to a certain park in London and you need to fix that gate. The gate's on order. So they go out, say, yeah, I've done it, complete it, take a photo of the new gate, and then that job's then marked off. So definitely taking photos is something PowerApps can do.
Brilliant. Let's see, what else do we have? Is it possible to create a desktop app wrapper, or is it just what you publish in a web browser? I guess.
Sorry, can you say that again?
Well, I think we're talking about PowerApps here. So is it possible to have like a desktop app, or is it just something that has to run in a browser?
It's something that runs in a browser, or you can get it to run in Microsoft Teams as a kind of an app inside of Teams, or you can install the PowerApps app and then essentially run it from inside of the app. So if you installed it on your mobile phone, you can run it from that. But otherwise, yeah, it would be through the browser or the Teams app if you were doing it on desktop.
Okay. Is it possible to use two lists relationally? I think we're talking about relational databases here, really.
Yeah, you can do. Yeah, definitely. So there's no real limitation to the amount of sort of data sources that you can use in your PowerApp. So you can have multiple in there. SharePoint itself isn't amazing at kind of being a relationship kind of database. If you had a very advanced kind of relationships, you probably would want to then start looking at something like Dataverse. However, you can have some basic like lookups and things like that based on saying, okay, there's a contact related to accounts, for example.
Okay, sounds like Paul here has already been using some PowerApps. So do you know any way of setting up the cumulative permissions?
So does that mean you want to be able to, I suppose I'm assuming what that question would mean would be that you wanted to have permissions for each of the items that are being sort of created, I guess.
I don't know, that's all that I have really, unless it's permissions on groups that are done to each other or something. I'm not sure.
Yeah, so to try and give a generic answer to that, if this doesn't answer your question, feel free to email me, and I'm happy to give you a more broader answer afterwards. But essentially, if you were looking at kind of controlling the sort of the item level permissions, there are things you can do with Power Automate on submission of an item to then update the sort of permissions at that item level to say actually only this person or this security group has access to that particular item. Okay. Hopefully that answers the question.
I hope so. And last question now, is it possible from the PowerApps details screen to add a button to allow the user to run a flow?
Definitely, yeah. So essentially the way it kind of works inside of PowerApps, in fact, I'll just do a very quick demonstration of this because it is super simple to do this. If you go into your PowerApp, and let's just say we wanted to run a Power Automate workflow, we can add a button into our app, and then if we click on action, we can actually create a Power Automate workflow directly from this button. So it might be that we wanted to integrate a workflow we've already created, or we can create a brand new workflow from this. So let's just say I just create one from a template for the time being. Click on continue. We can then see our Power Automate workflow and create our workflow and configure it in any way that we kind of want to. And then back in our Power App, essentially what this will do is the formula is really simple, that basically it will just say run. So I'll just select one that's pre-created, so you can see what this looks like as a formula. But essentially the formula is really basic. It will just say the name of the workflow, run, and then it will then ask for anything that you pass in. So there's certain things that you might want to pass into your Power Automate workflow, things like who's the sort of person you're assigning it to, for example, or who's the email being sent to, and then you can pass those in essentially as variables inside of here. Once you kind of close that off, that is literally just the formula that runs the Power Automate workflow directly from a button. So hopefully that answers your question. I
hope so. And that's it from the questions and the like. Once again, Dougie, thank you very much. That was a fantastic demo that you gave us there. Some really good things to look forward to playing with and seeing what we can do to get information in and out of Microsoft 365. A couple of little advertisements for upcoming events that we have. So we've got one next month on technology at the OS, which should be interesting to find out how the Ordnance Survey using technology to power their maps. And then on the 14th of April, Microsoft will be helping us to understand how the Internet of Things work and what we can do with that. So that's it for this session. Thank you very much again for Dougie. Thank you for everybody for attending. It was really well attended. And hopefully we'll see you next month on the 10th of March for the Technology at the OS webinar. So thanks everybody and have a nice evening.
Thank you guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.